Hi, curious friends. Welcome to another podcast episode on Building Your Best Brain podcast. My name's Sylvie, and if you're listening to this as this is coming out, happy last day of 2025. I am putting this episode together in a bit of an unusual place. So if you're seeing me in video, you can see that my setup's a bit different. I'm at my mom's house. And the reason why I'm putting this episode together before, the new year, before 2026, is because of you. This episode got birthed out of my last one, which was titled Your Brain Doesn't Like Your Goals, where I dove into how to goal set in a way that actually builds momentum in your brain, that builds progress in your brain. That episode, you don't have to listen to that one before listening to this one, but if you haven't listened to it, I definitely recommend it because it'll help with this. But through that episode, I asked for your guys' feedback when it comes to pain points around setting goals, achieving your goals. And overwhelmingly, I got a lot of feedback, both through email, through Instagram, on motivation and consistency and the struggle to stay motivated, which is partially related, and the struggle to be consistent. And so this episode won't cover what I covered last time, which is around actual goal setting and how to set up your goals to help gain momentum. We'll touch on it a little bit. But this is more going beyond the actual goal. So this goes beyond your ability to achieve that goal, setting up your brain to build circuits to support that goal. But this is going to be strictly focusing on motivation and consistency, really with the focus on the journey towards the goal. It is something that a lot of big teachers will come out and say, right after, you read their books or their podcasts where they talk about, like breaking your goal into small parts or making a plan or, having like building steps towards your goal. At the very end, they'll kind of throw in that, you got to enjoy the journey, that enjoying the journey is a big part of achieving the goal, but they don't give you a detailed way to enjoy the journey. And so the episode I did before on why your brain doesn't like your goals does touch on that, and that does help. But this episode, when we're focusing on consistency, motivation, some of the neuroscience behind motivation and consistency, is around crafting the journey so that it feels empowering, so that it feels fun, so that it feels like you're making progress, and so that it does not feel like, which has felt like this for me for a very long time, and I know it has for you too, energy sucking, powerless, discouraging, demotivating. And we're not taught how to do the opposite because I think there's just not a lot of people have experienced the opposite for one. They don't necessarily, the teachers that teach the goals maybe don't have that information or that understanding. And we live in a world that is really pain point focused and using that pain point as motivation. We're also a bit impatient, which is not completely our fault. It's partially how we're designed, partially how society is designed, right? When we're thinking of consumerism. The way we're going to structure this episode is we are going to go through a few common pain points when it comes to motivation and consistency, which I'll describe in a little bit. But we wouldn't be impatient if we knew the work was working, right? Like a big part of kind of pain point, for lack of a better word, pain point marketing or like pain point communication is that we place this urgency on our pain or on our discomfort or on things that we maybe don't love about our life, our body, our career, finances, whatever it may be. And it makes us easier to manipulate because there's this sense of urgency. We're in a fight or flight response, and we're just like in a space where we're looking for one thing to fix it all because we're not okay as we are. And this is kind of the spiral loop that we get into that pain point marketing is really good at doing. But with this, when we look at all the pain points, and I'll dive into a bit of the neuroscience why and tools to be able to dismantle it, you can wait for your goals to become a thing and feel okay and know that you're on the right track and feel great about yourself and the process. That is totally, totally, totally possible. And without further ado, we are going to dive into that right now. And so I've listed five. For my friends that are on video, I don't do this very often. I actually have notes, so you know it's going to be juicy. So you might see my eyes darting a little bit. Um, so the first pain point we'll cover is not finding the time. So again, this is all around motivation and consistency towards achieving your goals. First one is not finding the time. Two is being too caught up with the end result. So being too focused on the end result that the actual process to getting there feels painful. Three is feeling like you're not making enough progress or any progress. Four is being scared that the goal won't happen, that it won't be realized. And the last one, number five, is never feeling like you've actually made it. Kicker, even when you have. So those are the five that we're going to cover today, getting into some of the neuroscience behind it, what might be happening at the level of your brain, and what are the shifts that you can make to lessen those pain points and to actually start enjoying the journey. Because when you start enjoying the journey, wouldn't you think that being motivated and consistent would be a lot easier? If you thought yes, you thought right. So let's dive into the first one, the first problem, which is feeling like you don't have enough time. So when it comes to finding time towards your goals, this is where I would place quite a bit of focus on your frontal lobe. So those are the areas in your brain, the front of your brain. And there's many different collections of cells there that are responsible for different things, executive functions, where to put your focus. Even impulse control can be found in the front of your brain, kind of filtering decisions. And so, a big part of not finding the time is not actually putting in the legwork on how to make this goal possible. And this is where a few things are really important when it comes to the level of your brain. One is being specific. So being specific on the goal itself, but then being specific about what the first step is to that. In that specificity, chunking up your goals so that they're small and chunking them up so that they're small so that you can start building off of them. And so, a really good example that I like is building a meditation practice. Let's say meditation is something that you've wanted to do for a long time. You've been listening to me for a while. You know the benefits of meditation inside and out. And for the life of you, you just can't get a practice together that is consistent for more than a couple days or a couple weeks. Having a vague goal of I want to meditate more is not specific enough. Having a goal that's really big, which is let's say I want to meditate every single day for an hour, is too big. You can chunk it up by saying, I want to meditate every day. I want to do something every day. Or let's say I want to do something Monday to Friday. If you don't give your brain specifics, it's not going to actually set up any circuitry or any cues to help you get into that habit. And so one of my favorite ways to start doing this, because just kind of saying be specific and make it smaller can feel a bit daunting, is a tool that I like to call, it's a journaling prompt where I do the before, the during, and the after. So let's say we're building off of this goal, which is to meditate every day. And let's say we want to meditate every day for 5 minutes. In this prompt, I'm going to write down with as much detail as possible all the things I'm doing before my meditation. So let's say I carve out time in the morning. I write down like how I'm getting out of bed. And this can be a kind of fun mixture of like your ideal situation as well as a bit of reality. So I'm waking up well rested, whether that's your reality or not. Waking up well rested. I get up, I grab some water, I feed the cat, I'm in my PJs, and I get into my meditation chair. Then I write down the during, right? So I'm, meditating for 5 minutes. I write down how I wish for that to experience, again, whether it's a reality or not. Um, for meditation in particular, like, is it a certain music that I'm listening to? Is it a timer that I'm putting on? Is it a guided meditation? And then I do the same thing for after. So, how do I feel afterwards? What are the actions that I'm doing afterwards, right? So, for me, I'm then putting on my clothes, brushing my hair, packing my lunch together, going off to work. Doing these and getting as clear as you possibly can, which you can always change after, helps activate those circuits in your brain already, especially through mirror neurons, through visualizations. Mirror neurons are neurons that fire um, when thinking or when you're seeing somebody doing the activity that you're not doing. So they've done this quite a bit with motor actions and with athletes, right? So sitting on the bench and like watching your team play can fire the same motor neurons that your teammates are using to do those physical sport actions. And so doing this exercise will actually do that, and that'll help prime your brain and make those actions easier. And so, again, if you're having a hard time not finding the time towards it, I would say that specificity, making your goals smaller, and actually priming those circuits through that writing exercise can make a really big difference. I have in the show notes these question prompts so that you can start doing that yourself. And you're more than welcome to reach out to me through the comments, through my DMs to start helping build that. It's like one of my favorite things to do. So that helps a lot with not finding the time. But often a hidden problem. So people, it's fun. People will come to me and say, I have a hard time being consistent. I have a hard time finding the time. And they are very motivated people that jam pack their day, but they jam pack their day for other things. And it's not that they're lazy, it's that they have a hard time prioritizing themselves. So sometimes a hidden problem, and this could be you, where it's not that you can't find the time, it's that you struggle finding the time to put yourself first. And there's some discomfort around prioritizing yourself. And this can be more of a self-image related situation. And so for that, I mean, these tools that I just listed still work, but you may want to dive into a little bit of either the why you're not putting yourself first, if there's kind of a lack of awareness of why. And if there is an awareness around why you're not putting yourself first, and you're working on it and you have tools to work on it. Another tool around neutralizing can be really helpful. Whereas, you kind of write down the pros and cons of, okay, so let's say I do take these like 5-10 minutes to meditate. What are the pros of that? And what are the cons of that? And what this will help do is help neutralize it in your brain so that putting yourself first does not elicit an activation of your stress response. The second one, which used to be the bane of my existence, and honestly, sometimes still is if I'm not careful, is being too caught up in the end goal. And the reason is because the energy you spend on focusing on how you have not achieved that goal yet can be such a drain of energy and actually doesn't help you get to that goal closer. And I know if you're listening to this logically, you probably know this. Logically, I knew it at the time too. And even with this knowledge, I still struggled to not get in those states. And there's a few reasons why. So when we look at our stress response, right? So our fight or flight response, our sympathetic response, when we're too caught up with the end goal, we end up placing conditions on ourselves, right? So let's say it's a promotion. and you feel like your life would be so much better with this promotion. You got more money, your job will be more interesting, you'll be seen as more successful, you'll be happier or you'll be happy with this promotion. Because you don't have that promotion yet, your brain creates urgency. And with this urgency is where your stress response can kick off because it's under threat. It's like looking for all the ways that you can't be happy because you haven't achieved this goal yet. And apparently, you can only be happy when you have achieved that goal. And there's two ways which this can kind of negatively impact your consistency and motivation. One is you have two types of stress responses in your brain, and I will link the episode where I dive into the two a little bit. It's called Stress is Not Bad for You. And one of them is your fast response. And so your fast response happens immediately, as it would suggest. And it can happen immediately because it doesn't require some of your frontal brain structures to activate. It's really through like your brainstem, which is at the back of your brain, also could be referred to as your lizard brain. And it has direct connections to the adrenal glands in your kidneys and releases noradrenaline, norepinephrine. And so what this means is that you're not really using, and like not using, I don't mean that like, because your brain is always, there's always activity in your brain. Even when you're sleeping, there's activity in your brain. But this response can happen without inputs to your frontal lobe, right? So your frontal lobe could be sending signals, right? Like logic and reasoning and like filtering out things and like sending it to other parts of your brain, but that won't necessarily shut down the stress response because it's happening at the back. And the reason is why this was evolutionarily advantageous was because if we needed an immediate response, we cannot be thinking about it, right? We need to just be acting on it. And so this is really not great if we're looking at being motivated and consistent, right? Because we do need those other parts of our brain. We need our reward centers. We need our learning centers, right? Like our hippocampus or memory centers. We need our frontal lobe to help us kind of filter through and make decisions that are best for us. And that is extremely hard when we're experiencing the stress, especially at the level of our fast response. Another way which this can be done is when we look at motivation and consistency, learning is a big part of it, right? Like it's very rewarding once we learn things, right? And we see ourselves getting better to keep wanting to learn more and wanting to get better. And so, one of the brain waves that helps with learning is a high frequency brainwave called our beta brainwave. It fires between 15 and a little over 30 hertz, which is just cycles per second. And it's a wide band, so there's a big range and it can be binned into specific categories. And so at the lower end, right, which is between 12 and 15, I believe, or maybe 18, is like your prime spot for learning because it's a real like relaxed kind of learning where it's high frequency enough that your brain is getting a lot of stimulation to rewire those circuits, but it's not a ton of energy. And at the level of our body, it does feel like a relaxed attention, a calm learning attention. But at that same band, our beta band, we have this higher end, which we call high beta, which is, between like 25 and a little over 30. And in this band is where we get into our hypervigilance state. So we are paying attention, but we're expending a lot of energy paying attention. And this can be like a one-way ticket to burning out. And of course, how motivated are you going to be towards your goals when you're exhausted and burnt out from your brain activity, from your paying attention? And so the being too caught up with the end goal can really kick off your stress response in more than one way. And the way to move through that is a simple exercise, which is figuring out your desire underneath that goal. And so, for example, if we're using the promotion, And the big thing that you want to feel, the desire underneath that is maybe getting recognized that you're doing a good job. Maybe it's recognizing that you're gifted or that you're successful or that you have special skills that, like only you have or very few people have. Recognizing that is super helpful. Seeing how that is the case now in small ways or big ways. And also recognizing that there's multiple ways to get that desire, right? That the promotion itself is not the only way that you can feel those things. And that helps create the urgency down. And then it also helps build the other circuit around how it is you desire to feel, which will make the whole process more enjoyable. And this process, I'll link underneath again, is discussed in the last episode around goal setting and why your brain doesn't like your goals. So I'll include that in here. But a huge part of getting out of this fight or flight, if you're too caught up with the end result, is figuring out the desire underneath it. The third one is thinking you aren't making progress. So this is not like, are you making progress or not? It's just having the belief that all the effort you're doing is not making progress, which of course impacts your motivation and your ability to be consistent. And this impacts the brain in two ways. One, you are focusing on the absence of your goal, your desired goal. And this will impact what your brain decides to focus on. You have many different types of cells in the front of your brain responsible for specific functions. And it really is your brain's filtration system of deciding, okay, based off what I'm looking at, what am I going to bring in and what circuit am I going to bring it to? So if you are feeling like you're not making enough progress, you are literally helping your brain continue to focus on how you're not making enough progress. And you're sending that stimulation to your brain and making it stronger every single day. So that's one way that your brain is impacted by this thought or this belief you have. And another, which is interesting and is studied a lot in the context of depression, is that there's this phenomenon, and we see it in mice in particular, or we study it, called learned helplessness. And this we see a lot in depression, and we see it in depression models of mice as a symptom of depression, where you feel like, as a result of feeling like you're not making enough progress, that there is nothing you can do anymore. This element of like defeat that, it would take too much effort to even try, so you don't do anything at all. And I see this with my clients as well when it comes to brain training. We have these at-home EEG devices that we pair with meditation to help our brain get into different states, different brainwave states. And so we use a technique called neurofeedback, where if we're increasing a brainwave, let's say alpha brainwave, one of my favorites, the music will increase when the brainwave increases, and it'll decrease when it decreases. So you know in real time what your brain is doing. And the amount of time that it increases, this volume over the length of your meditation, is called a reward rate. So if we, let's say, increase the volume for 80% of the meditation, your reward rate would be 80%. When the meditations are set for a reward rate that's lower than 50%, so lower than half the time, I often see the brain just plummet. Like if it goes below 50%, it'll take people to like a 10% reward rate, 5% reward rate, 2% reward rate. And it's not that their brain is not capable, but it's the way that we have it set up or where they are in their rewiring journey, that there's almost like learned helplessness with the brain where it's like not getting enough reward. So it says kind of like F it and just like nosedives. And when it comes to your goals, it's super important. This kind of circles back really nicely that you find a way to play on your brain's reward system. That is so, so important when it comes to rewiring the brain, but also for being consistent and staying motivated. One of the ways that I do it, which I love, is by making it a game. By making it a game, having different levels, finding ways that you can improve in small ways, so that it's fun. It's like, okay, well, I'm going to try this new tool. And, it helps with the reward, because you're having different levels and little stepping stones, but it also helps it make it less serious. And this is something that I do a lot with this podcast, and I do it a lot with social media. I've been trying different methods and like different ways to communicate and trying to communicate in ways that is going to speak to people better. And before, I didn't think about that so much, and I would look at my metrics and take it really seriously and take it to heart and take it personally. And then, you know what that did? It made me not want to post. Well, a big way that I rectify it is by seeing really small ways that the way that I'm trying to communicate and the new tools that I'm trying are working. And so that can be, comments that I get every once in a while, DMs that I get once in a while that, this episode made a big difference and why. And while that's maybe not my end goal, right? My end goal might be to have, more people comment, more people listen to the podcast. And that's wonderful. But by rewarding myself all throughout helps me with momentum, helps make my podcast better, helps make my post better. And the impact that I'm making is real, right? So, yes, I might not be at my end goal of impacting however many people I want to impact, but impacting one life doesn't just impact one life. That one person, by making a small shift, a small change, impacts 5 people around them. That impacts 10 people, 20, and it just continues to expand. So, if you feel like you aren't making enough progress and you're getting into that state of focusing on the absence and getting into learned helplessness, make it a game and find a way to reward yourself. Number 4 is being scared it won't happen. This is a good one. Some of the learnings from being too caught up with the end result can help with this, but this is a little bit different because this activates your fear centers. So you have a little almond-shaped structure called the amygdala, which is in the middle of your brain, and it's close to your memory centers. It's also close to a lot of your motor centers, so it can actually influence how you behave in the physical way, as well as what you remember and what you're learning and what you're focusing on. But it has inputs directly into our stress response. So you can stimulate the amygdala and it'll turn on cortisol through the stress response right away. You can even cut off the amygdala and it can help shut down the stress response. So if you're in this fear state that it won't happen, that is the stuff that you're strengthening. You're strengthening getting into your stress response. And we kind of talked a little bit about how having that too much or having it in a way that's chronic can really hinder your ability to move towards your goals in a way that's enjoyable and in a way that helps you build. This is where 2 things can be really helpful. One is recognizing that that goal that you have, let's say this podcast, for example, there are specific skills that you need to be able to be a good podcaster, to be able to educate people online. There are skills, they're skills. And we talk about this in the last episode a lot around why your brain doesn't like your goals, but focusing on the skill building and how to set goals so that you're focusing on strengthening the skills can help bring that fear down, because whether it happens or not, you know that you need skills once you get to that end goal. And so it'll make you feel like you're making momentum and progress, even in the absence of that goal being a reality. You'll feel like you're working on it every day, which you are. And so for how to set those goals, I invite you to listen to that episode. But if you have a fear that it won't happen, this will help your brain feel like you are working towards it every day and making meaningful progress. And that'll really help allow the amygdala to kind of like step to the side and not be so active in the process. Also, there is a disconnect between physical action and physical results at the level of your brain, which is something that I think a lot of people maybe don't know, or there's just not a lot of communication around it. Again, it kind of links to like pain point marketing and being impatient and how getting into that impatient spot makes us more manipulative. So maybe people don't want you to know this, but I do. So you're going to learn it, which is, yeah, there's a disconnect between how you feel and what's maybe happening at a cellular level. And this I saw in one of my brain training clients recently, where we're working on a brainwave. So her big thing is that she wants to sleep better. She has some struggle with sleep. She has some struggle with stress and how it relates to sleep. And so we're increasing this brainwave called theta, which is associated with the flow state, subconscious state, and is also a brainwave, a slower brainwave that helps the transition between wakefulness and sleep. And she's incredibly diligent. She's been doing the meditations every day for over 2 months. She even sometimes meditates twice a day with the EEG, and her brainwave was just not budging. And I made this small shift in her meditation, truly like very, very small. And when we did it together, she 3x'd the power of this brainwave out of nowhere for the entire 15 minutes. And this was because she was consistent. It wasn't because I made this change. The small change did help, but her brain doing those actions consistently made her able to do what she did after I made that small switch. And so I share this because it's very likely, if you're being consistent and doing the small actions every day, even though you haven't seen the physical result yet, you are at the level of your brain getting closer and closer and closer and closer to it. And that's why partially, some people it's different, right? When you see people reach massive levels of success that feels like overnight, it's very rare that it's actually overnight. They've been probably working quietly on the skills, on being consistent, on doing the things, and then all of a sudden they have all this success. And the people that are able to hold it, right? Not the people that kind of like get success and then you never hear from them again, is because they've been working on them. And the brain is able to have the circuits to support it. So being scared it won't happen is recognizing that being consistent is changing your brain. Even if you don't see the physical things yet, it doesn't mean that it's not working. And focusing on the skills so that your brain feels like it's making momentum, and that'll bring the fear center. It'll quiet it right down for sure. And the last one, which is my favorite, and you're probably thinking, how has Sylvie, who's a neuroscientist, how has she not talked about dopamine yet? Here it comes. So the last one we'll talk about is never feeling like you've made it. Kicker, even when you have, even when you have. And this is where I'll talk about dopamine. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, and it's really been labeled as a neurotransmitter for motivation, well, especially reward. Um, and of course, what I'll be sharing about is a very simplified view of dopamine, but dopamine, depending on what receptor it binds to, depending on what group of neurons it binds to, can have very different functions at the level of the brain. But dopamine is revolved in reward, but what it's more involved with is attention. And so it's not so much reward solely in the sense of pleasure, like an addiction, like when you're taking a drug and you have an increase in dopamine, it's like a pleasure feeling in your brain. Yes and no. It's really more paying attention to things that are novel, novel seeking behavior, new things to pay attention to. And this is where never feeling like you've made it is almost can be an addictive thought to have, because dopamine is increasing when you're being hyper vigilant, basically looking for ways that you haven't made it yet. And as you continue to do that, this continues to get stronger. And when you get in that hypervigilant state, it never feels safe to rest and it never feels safe to feel like you've made it. And some of you have probably experienced this, right? Where you have a goal, you have an objective, you work tirelessly towards that goal, towards that objective. You get it, and you feel nothing. Maybe you feel good for a little bit, but for the most part, you feel neutral, you feel the same. Maybe, this has certainly happened to me, maybe you feel worse than you did before. And this is the goal that you were so excited to achieve. You were putting so much effort towards it. You thought it would make you feel better, it would make you feel happier, it would make you feel more successful. And you get there and nothing. This is likely this system, right? Where yes, your stress response, there's definitely an element of your stress response involved, but it's almost addictive to be in that response because of your dopamine, because of the way it's firing, because of its ability to keep you in a hyper vigilant, novel seeking state, looking for new things where you get the goal and you're like, all right, what's the next one? Before you've even had time to celebrate. And there's two layers to this that can be really, really helpful if you find you're experiencing this a lot. One is to work on your stress regulation, which you might not love, but trust me, once you get a hang of it and you start seeing it working, it really is the secret. It really is the secret. There's nothing wrong with, feeling discomfort and feeling a certain level of stress towards your goals. I think that's important. And at the level of your brain and body, it makes sense. But if you're like too far in the other direction, it's not going to help you stay motivated. It's not going to help you stay consistent. And there's no way in hell you're going to be able to actually enjoy what you're creating. If you've even managed to create it, the benefits on working on your stress regulation. And I'm going to put another link. There's a lot of links in the show notes this time, but I think it's good is an episode around where your brain is at in terms of stress regulation so that it can help kind of guide you where to start, knowing where you're at so you know where to start. But being able to come back to a balanced state more frequently can benefit you in terms of creativity, right? So you're going to have more access to different areas of your brain, newer ideas are going to drop in, newer ways of doing things are going to drop in, and you're going to feel like you're able to receive them. In terms of your brain's energy, if it's not spending energy getting into your fight or flight, being hypervigilant, you can take that high frequency stimulation and put it elsewhere, which is incredible. And so you're going to be able to build momentum. You're going to be able to build circuits that'll actually enjoy what you're creating. And even at the level of your metabolism, this is great. You're going to be able to direct your energy more easily. You're going to be able to direct your focus more easily. Literally, stress regulation, I could talk about forever. And I literally have, if you've looked at past episodes, and there's many more coming in 2026. That is a great place to focus on if you're feeling like you've never made it. Focus on feeling safe where you are now. So many benefits to it. So definitely check out that episode if you haven't already. And then a second layer to this, but that's layer one. You can't get to layer two until you've got a good chunk of layer one figured out, is to celebrate yourself and to celebrate yourself more often and to celebrate yourself all the way along the journey, because our brain's reward system is totally underutilized, and it is a huge way that it's going to feel great when you quote unquote have made it, because it's felt great along the whole way. And that's where, which we talked a bit, right, around making it a game if you feel like you aren't making progress. That's kind of similar, but it's almost another level because recognizing you're making progress is great, but when you take time out to celebrate it, that's where your brain is going to use dopamine almost in the other direction. You're paying attention and you're rewarding and experiencing pleasure. And this level of reward and pleasure is motivating for your brain to continue to learn. We see that in brain training all the time. Like once I change protocols so that people are getting more reward, that's where I see the brain really take off in terms of its ability to change its activity at quite a rapid rate. So if you sticked with me along the whole episode, amazing work. How to move forward, because I've shared a lot of stuff. I shared like a lot of science, a lot of tools, and the goal of this episode is for you not to do this all at once because that would be way too much. And again, funny, it'll hard to be motivated and stay consistent if you try to apply everything at once. So what I'd like you to do is this episode, the previous episode if you haven't, which is why your brain doesn't like your goals. And I want you to pick one pain point to do alongside your goals. So once you've kind of set up, you've listened to the other episode, you've set up your goals in a way that feels motivating, and then you pick one pain point again, whether it's not finding the time, being too caught up at the end goal, thinking you aren't making progress, being scared it won't happen, or feeling like you've never made it, even if you have. And then using the resources and tools that I shared in that specific part. And this will help the journey towards your goals feel more enjoyable, and it'll help you support your brain in gaining that momentum towards your goal. And most importantly, right, we do all this not so much towards, although it does help, right, achieve that end goal for sure, but it's so that you are healthiest and happiest and the most well-resourced all the way through. That is the most important. All the resources are in the show notes, but again, this is a big episode. We cover a lot, so please DM me at synaptic.sylvie. Leave a comment below if you're getting stuck anywhere or if anything feels confusing. That is not on you, that is on me. I love to dive into this work, so please don't be shy. Revisit this at any point, 2025, 2026. Any time of the year is a good year to reevaluate your goals and how you approach them. So with that, I'm wishing you all the best, and I have no doubt that you're going to make such meaningful progress this year. And I look forward to chatting again with you soon on the next episode of Building Your Best Brain.